Sup guys, eBrags here. Today, we're going to be talking about some tips to optimize or enhance your pre-skills to perform better in Raid. This will help increase your healing output, which will then enhance your ability to keep people alive, helps you parse, and also to bring fewer healers, which will speed up the Raid. To kind of prove my experience as a Disciplined Priest, here's a snapshot of my logs. They're in the description below if you want to do a deeper dive into them. Trust me though, they're totally legit. Anyways, let's get started with some general tips before getting into boss specifics. The first category I want to talk about is optimizing your Rapture procs. Rapture is one of Discipline's most important talents, as it allows us to not go 1 minute into the fight. It provides 2.5% of your mana back when a power word shield breaks. However, this can only proc once every 12 seconds. You will, however, receive mana back for every shield that breaks at the same time, which as you can imagine, can lead to some ridiculous mana back situations. On some fights, this doesn't line up well, particularly on XT, AOI, Mimron, and Hodir. This is due to constant raid damage, making it hard to line up a lot of shield breaks all at once. So on these fights, you're not going to be able to rely on your Rapture procs as much, so you're going to have to rely on making sure you optimize your SHADOWFIEND, or using mana pots efficiently, or getting innervates, all of which we'll talk about using later. There are certain fights where it might be good not to spam shield on the tank off cooldown. The first star death on Algalon is a huge example. At the start of this fight, the only person taking damage is the tank, so you can shield all the other raid members, whether it's 24 and 25 man, or 9 people and 10 man, and the star death will burst all the shields at once. This will give you an insane mana return. If you shield a tank within 12 seconds of the star's death, because the tank is taking so much damage from Algalon, the shield will break and your Rapture proc will not be up. This means you will lose out on 2.5% times the number of shields broken at that time. For example, on 25 man, that's up to 60% of your mana you're losing out on. Obviously, there's some fights where this just won't work out well, as we talked about earlier, and in those fights, or in a big tank healing moment, a 10k shield in the tank is worth more than some mana. Obviously, these goals and tips are more meant to optimize your performance. It's not meant to solely work in every single situation. You're going to have to use your discretion and understand where your tanks are taking a lot of damage. Our second tip we're going to be talking about today is optimizing your SHADOWFIEND. SHADOWFIEND provides 5% mana per hit. However, we can augment this to 6% per hit while you have the Mana Hymn buff up. This buff provides you 20% more mana for about 8 seconds. However, every time you get the tick of the mana return, it restores the effect, the extra mana effect to the full duration. Assuming you have a 25k mana pool, not decked out in full Ulduar gear, or missing some buffs in a 10-man, 5% per hit gives you 1250 mana per hit, while 6% per hit gives you 1500 mana per hit. This can easily result in an additional 1.5 to 2k mana return from SHADOWFIEND, and this will scale upwards as we get more mana from better gear. The second part of this tip is more commonly known. Obviously, if you use SHADOWFIEND right before hero comes up, it will also receive the buff, increasing its attack speed, giving you a ton more mana back. However, obviously, some fights when you hero right off the bat, this will result in a ton of wasted mana. I try not to SHADOWFIEND until I'm about 20% or less mana. However, there are some fights that last longer than 5 minutes, meaning you can use 2. Examples primarily include just Yogg 0 and Mimron. Freya can take longer if you want to use it super early on and then your group has a bunch of deaths. That just seems to be an our group problem more than anything else, though. For Mimron in particular, I can Fiend with Hero in Phase 2, giving me a huge mana return, and it's up again halfway through Phase 4 after dealing with Phase 3 and Phase 4 where there's a high amount of random damage coming out, so your Rapture procs aren't going to be super big. The next category we'll be talking about is not just spamming Power Word Shield. Disciplined Priest gets a bad rep for being a brain-dead shield spammer, and while this might be true 90% of the time, there are some situations where other spells will result in a higher healing output. Prayer Mending is particularly good on fights where there's consistent raid AoE damage, but also on fights where damage is randomly applied to a few targets at a time, XT during Sparks, Freya during a lot of her mechanics, Thorum, and Mimron Phase 2. Assuming you all get 5 procs, this can easily heal more than a 10k shield does. Plus 5 chances that Divine Aegis procs are huge, especially on fights like AOI where that shield will definitely be used up. Again, Prayer Mending also, because of the way it works with random few target damage, it's a smart heal. It'll actually work really well in the fights that your Rapture procs don't work well on, so you'll be able to use it on fights where mana might be an issue, and it's a very effective heal for that. Prayer Healing is our next heal. Has uses on XT, Algalon, Freya, and Mimron. Try to time it to go right off after an AoE damage comes out. On some fights like Freya and Ignis, you will get silenced, so be careful about precasting. Just make sure when you are using Prayer of Healing, you're using it on a group that has either a full stack of melee. What we like to do in our raid 2 and group 2 is we have a lot of our warlocks in there, and because all their pets also take some damage on some fights, you're able to get a monster heal off where it heals all 5 of the range members in that group, plus up to 4 or 5 pets as well. It can result in a ridiculous amount of healing. Up next we got Renew. Just kidding, it's pretty garbage for Discipline. It might have some uses on the tank for fights that don't have a lot of raid damage, Mimiron Phase 1, for example, especially during the tarts where the tank is getting absolutely clapped by the Plasma Blast, but for the most part, you're not really using the spell. Divine Hymn is something that you might as well use with the mana saving ability every fight. Try to time right after a huge AoE attack goes out that doesn't get Divine Sacrifice or covered by all your shields. Even if it's just used while the tank is getting pounded, this can result in big heals focused on the tank, especially if everybody else is at full health, because it is a smart heal. It will only heal people who are hurt. You can often get hits, crits and hits that are up to 9k, and because it's going to be ticking on them every single time for 4 or 5, over that 5 seconds, even if it's just on the tank, you can easily get up to 45,000 healing. And obviously if it's on the raid, when everyone's taking like the full amount of it, you can easily get close to 100,000 healing off of your Divine Hymn. Our fourth tip today is managing your pre-pool correctly. Assuming you have Illustration of the Dragon Soul, it's bis till ICC, so definitely go get it. You want to ideally maintain 10 stacks going into the boss. That way your first 10 shields before starting the fight will benefit from the 200 spell power effect. To do this, simply cast Levitate on a pet or your least favorite caster in the raid every 10 seconds to maintain it. For pre-pot, you have 2 options. You can get shields on up to 20 people. Some will likely fall off before the damage is absorbed, even on fights like AOI with high raid damage pulses. And then pre-mana pot before the combat starts to get your mana back to full. You can get some shields out and quickly drink between doing some, but you won't be able to maintain as many as by using a mana pot to regain mana instantly. You can pop a wild magic potion for extra spell power as you pre-shield or as you go into the fight. If you go this route, you won't be able to start with as many shields out, or you will not be able to start at full mana for the start of the fight. Our last tip is reducing healing numbers. This is much more so for speeding up clears, allowing healers to parse, and just general excitement. Hey, you try sitting there on non-hard mode fights with nothing to heal. Reducing the number of heals also lets you test out your healing capabilities by straining you to cover more people, while also now requiring you to heal the tank more. Just quickly going down the list here, Razor and Ignis are 2 healable, XT and AOI 3 heal. If you're really sweaty, you can get quick kills on them. 4 otherwise. Algalon depends really heavily on the amount of stars you kill. 3 if you're really killing like 2 or 3 during the Big Bang, where people aren't taking the damage for it. If your group isn't at that level yet, bring 5 just to be safe. On Colo, Cat Lady, and Hodier, you can probably 2-3 heal, maybe even solo heal some of those. However, the H-Pals are probably going to get to stay. H-Pal, while you get stuck going Shadow, just due to the extra damage that you can do. It's just better for the raid. Thorum is 3 healable. You solo heal the hallway, while the other 2, ideally 2 H-Pals, cover the arena. Freya is 4 healable if people follow the mechanics. It can quickly get out of hand, though, if people aren't moving out Nature's Fury. People are sitting and dying to the Lashers, things like that. Mimiron, we just finally healed this with 4 people. Some groups are definitely going to still rely on 5 heals. Sweaty groups might be able to go 3. I feel like that might be a little unreliable, though, especially during Phase 2 and 4 when there's a ton of damage going out. Gen Fee, you can 4 heal this. It's a weird fight where you actually want a longer Phase 2 with Animus to get more heals in for your parse, but ideally, obviously, no one else is going to want that. And then Yogg is 2 healable with an H-Pally. 3 works for the non-super sweaty groups. Okay, so we'll be getting to some boss-specific tips here. Obviously on XT you can't really heal anything because there's no healing parse. Anyway, you can use the Goblin Beam Welder to heal something, but obviously if you get out of the vehicle you're just going to get completely crushed, so don't even bother trying to do that meme. On Razor Scale, I've done parses where you just have people stand in the fire and dump heals. It doesn't seem to invalidate the logs. On Ignis, basically you have to 2 heal to parse. If you run double H-Pal, better hope one has a ret set or just decides not to do anything. Spam shields before the AoE attack, and then Palm and Prayer of healing groups that have 4 or 5 people with it. On XT, 3 healing is made much easier with utilizing cooldowns. Ideally, you have 2 tantrums post-heart with this. If you have double H-Pally, a Prot, and a Ret, you can double sack both tantrums. Your S-Priest can Divine Hymn the first or second, and you get the other. Also make sure to utilize Prayer of Mending during Tantrum, and Prayer of Healing can put up insane numbers for that as well, especially because you have a melee stack and a range stack. Up next we got AOI. This fight sucks for getting Rapture to line up, so be careful with mana. I'll shield and palm spam phase 1, and then mana him and fiend going into the middle guy. This basically brings me from 20% back to 100% mana, and I still have mana pot ready to use. I'll divine him the first spread after the rune goes down, especially if a lot of people are near it. Phase 3 is basically the same. Ideally you throw Penance out in the tank right as Fusion Punch goes out so you don't have a tank death. Algalon's up next. This fight we use a ton of variance based on the number of stars that die and the number of healers you utilize. Start the fight with the main tank with the inspiration buff, a shield, and renew on. Penance as soon as the shield breaks. Every global cooldown outside of Penance should be used to shield the raid. Ideally you get all 24 people besides the tank shielded before the first star spawns and dies. As soon as it dies, start shielding the people who are the most hurt, as the second star for the many groups will be dying soon after that. You likely won't be getting everybody bubbled this time, but enough will be done to get another huge Rapture return. Unfortunately, these giga Rapture procs will likely not continue due to constellations attacking random people and breaking them, but you should basically be max mana at this point still. From this point on, make sure you penance the main tank, keep a prayer mending out, and shield people about 20 seconds out from a star death. Divine Hymn will pump heals after a non-divine sack star as well. Alright, Arman, pre-shield the raid, the explosions that hit raid Y can get huge Rapture procs, then just heal the main tank for the most part. It's a pretty simple fight. Again, Divine Hymn, a raid AoE that doesn't get sacrificed. For the cat lady, the only thing I'm going to talk about is making sure how to optimize the fears, so bring your PvP trinket and fear ward yourself about 2 minutes before you pull. The first fear will get warded, and then ideally you spam Mass Dispel quickly to get everyone out of the fear. Use your PvP trinket or another priest fear to get the second and third dispel. Ideally your group is finished by the time the fourth one comes up, but your fear ward will be back up if your group is slow. For Hodier, I actually haven't healed this fight in a while due to our raid choosing me as Shadow over an H-Pally swapping the Ret due to better damage. If you were lucky enough to go Discipline for this fight, Prayer, Mending, and Power Word Shield are obviously your go-to. Penance during Frozen Blows, Mass Dispel can be huge for melee as well. Divine Hymn later in the fight can be great. People seem to not focus on getting near fires and stop moving. Thus they get a lot of the frozen stacks and take a ton of damage. For Thorum, we accidentally 3-healed this 2 weeks ago, and it honestly didn't go too bad. I solo healed Hallway while the 2 H-Pals stayed at the arena. The hallway by yourself can be kinda sketch, tank takes a good amount of damage, and if you have small brain DPS like us, they will pull threat as the tank is stunned and will get nearly one shot. Just pump your heals and then Shadowfiend as hero goes out in phase 2 to get your mana back. During phase 2, try to mass dispel the frozen people quickly, and then get back to shield spamming and healing the tank. Freya is kind of a crapshoot fight. Prayer healing on melee after Tremor is good. Fiend early to get a second one late in the fight if your group is slow and getting 6-minute kills regularly. Try to prioritize shields on people who are getting mechanics, whether that's a beam, Nature's Fury, or a target by certain bosses and stuff. So just kind of get yourself through that fight. Ask for an intervade if you need to, because it can be a long fight if your group is slow. Up next we got Mimiron. In phase 1, just shield the people who get napalm and spam tank. You can pre-shield the pets who stay in for static explosion as well. In phase 2, start pre-shielding people 17 seconds before the phase starts. Use Divine Hymn when a raid sack isn't up, and ideally when the heat debuff is up and nailing most people. In phase 3, damage is mostly sporadic outside the person tanking the head. So you can power word shield spam people, a lot of them probably won't end up breaking if people are following mechanics. In phase 4, if you use Shadowfiend in phase 2, it will be up about a minute into this phase. Keep shielding people as there's a lot of random damage going out from the middle section, plus also people just panicking and getting hit by bombs, fire, and whatnot. And people really should just focus on staying alive and positioning. You can't do any healing if you die. Gen V is a fight that really emphasizes how useless healing parses can be, a fight where people really shouldn't be taking any damage at all in phase 1. However, because Rapture works in limited capacity, shield groups of range members, if the person with the leech effect is slow, they will all break, resulting in a big Rapture proc. Also, the shield effect is not diminished by the pools of vapor, so feel free to stand in there and basically get free powered shields on everyone. In phase 2, you basically want the fight to take a while for a healer parse, but obviously for speed, no one's going to want that. This is due to the fact that the damage from Animus racks up over time. Divine Hymn while not in the puddles late in the phase, ideally right before a pulse of damage goes out, but otherwise stay in the range attack and spam shields. Alright, last boss guys, thanks for watching through to this point, really appreciate you guys. Getting the Yogg here. Shield melee non-tank members, unfortunately Sarah's damage blessing will ruin your big Rapture procs, but you should be fine mana wise as phase 2 doesn't require a lot of healing. If you do find yourself struggling for mana, you can Fiend in phase 1, and it will be up a little bit in the phase 3, even if you 2 brainwave it. Prayer of Healing is great to time right as the phase 1 adds die on a group full of melee. On phase 3, pre-shield people for first gaze. A lot of DPS will burn their sanity to get extra damage on the boss. This can result in huge raptures or just lots of healing. Hey, thanks for watching all the way through the video, it really means a lot to me. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. I try to balance between Wrath content as well as classic content. I might even branch out to some other stuff in the near future if that's what people like. Anyways, click that video if you want to see something before new stuff comes out. Hope to see you around.